Hello, everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk About Romance. This is the second event in our Indie Author Week celebrations. My name is Renee Edwards, and I'm the Program Director for Fairfax County Public Library. During this presentation, please make sure to turn off your videos and stay muted unless you are the speaker. So authors, keep your videos on. But everyone else, please for now, keep your videos off. We will have a Q&A session at the end of our author presentation, so please enter any questions or comments into the chat. This program will be recorded and available on the library's website. So you may be wondering, what are indie authors and why do we celebrate Indie Author Day? An indie author is someone who self-publishes to sell and who wants to reach as many readers as possible and grow a profitable author publishing business. So our annual Indie Author Day is a very special event for libraries and its readers because it allows us to meet and celebrate the achievements of our local and indie writers. This evening, we have a wonderful panel of authors to share their experiences as romance writers. I would like to introduce J.T. Bach, Christina Hunter, Nicole E. Kelleher, Carla Cradaville, Natalina Rice, and Laverne Thompson. Welcome and thank you all for being here. So let's start with our first question. Tell us about yourself. Who are you? So we will start with JT.
Hey, oh my gosh. First off, too, I want to thank everybody for being here. I am so stoked to be number one on the panel with these awesome authors and also to see so many people joining us and interested in indie authors and romance. So yay. I am a graphic designer and copywriter by day. And I am a romance author by night. So I like to say that my JT Bach is my secret identity. So it's my alternate identity. So I like to look at myself as a superhero, which is kind of goes like hand in hand with my books because I like to write stories about people with special abilities and powers that find romance. And this has always been something since I was a child because I grew up in Baltimore. And so a lot of my stories take place in Baltimore, but I grew up in Baltimore and I used to love writing stories as a child with my friends and we would act those stories out in my grandmother's basement. So that's sort of how my love for writing began and why I got into writing. But when I went to college, I decided to become a graphic designer and then work on my writing at night. So that's who I am.
Thank you. All right, Christina, tell us about yourself.
Well, thank you, first of all, for having this event. I think it's awesome for libraries, as I know, to have events for writers. So thank you for that. So about me, I was born with a mild disability. I have a mild form of cerebral palsy. And ironically, I didn't know it at the time. I hated it, but in order for me to progress in school, they taught me to type at an early age, which was 9. Nowadays, I know there are 3-year-olds on iPads, but back then that was a new thing to be on, being taught to type when I was 9. So it helped me progress through school, and it actually helped me to understand and enjoy the written word. So I was able to go to on to high school and college. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology. I then went on working for a few years in nonprofit, but then as life happens, I ended up working in a public library. I have now worked at Loudoun County Public Library for 17 years. And finally, after making up my mind some more, I'm currently in grad school to get my master's degree in library science. So that is my progression up to now, and that's my story.
Librarians rock. All right, Nicole, please tell us about yourself.
Well, I was born in Flint, Michigan, and I've lived in California, and I've lived in Europe, and I've lived in different places. But I moved to Virginia in 2004, and my house, actually, the house I'm living in now, is the longest place I've ever lived. What is that? 2004, 16 years. So I've been all over the place and had so many different homes, but I went to school at University of Michigan, and I studied languages and art, and I have always loved reading. I love reading romances, and when I moved here, I came here with my son and my twin boys, and my husband started working, but he started traveling 75% of the year. So I decided to start writing, and it just seemed that romance novel, since he was gone all the time, seemed to be a good fit for me. So I just continue to do it, and I love it.
Thank you. Carla, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Carla. I grew up in Fairfax County, so I've lived in Northern Virginia for a long time. I briefly lived in New York City in between, but we ended up coming back home to be near family. And when we were raising, my husband and I were raising our family, it made the most sense to be near all the grandparents. I've had a few different careers. I worked in advertising. I worked as a social worker, and I've been a stay-at-home mom. So I've done a whole progression of things. And I started writing not until I was about 40. It was kind of a little bit of a midlife crisis for me. And it was on my bucket list. And it's been a real lifesaver for my sanity. So the writing has helped me a lot. I have 2 teenage kids and 2 dogs. And this year I've done a lot of cooking and a lot of gardening, a lot of baking, I guess, like everybody else here as we're quarantined at home. So I'm happy to be here and see all your faces tonight. Something new and different.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much. All right, Natalina, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm really glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm actually a hybrid. I'm just clear that up. Disclosure, I'm a hybrid writer. So I I have self-published books and also books published by a small publisher. I was born in Portugal, and I came to the United States when I met my husband, who was in the Navy. And my dad worked for an airline. And so it was like being in the military. We moved every so many years, and we would go somewhere and live there for 1 or 2 years, then come back. So Nicole, I feel your pain. And then I married the Navy guy, and we continued to do that until he finally retired from the Navy some years back. I originally was a tour guide in Portugal. My specialty is languages. I speak 5 different languages. And then I'm a language geek. I love languages. Then when I came to the United States, I found out that my job didn't quite exist here. So I had to think of something else. I ended up going back to school, and I am a teacher now. So I'm an elementary school English as a second language teacher. And I learned another language since then, out of necessity. To communicate with my students and their parents. And I've written my whole life. I mean, I remember being like 7, 8 years old, and I was already writing poems and little stories and that kind of thing. But I think all my travels and meeting people I lived in Africa for many, many years, in many different countries in Africa for most of my childhood and teens. So all of that is kind of squeezed into my books, my stories, but I'm really glad to be here.
Thank you. So question, the more languages you learn, is it easier to learn? Like, because you speak so many languages, does it get easier?
Yes and no. It's interesting that when languages are very similar, it's sometimes harder because you get them confused. But I've been for many, many years, I didn't learn any new languages. And now recently I decided that I was going to teach myself Chinese. And I get so excited when I'm listening to somebody speaking Chinese and I recognize like one word and I'm going, yes, I'm actually learning. But yeah, it does become a little easier though, because you have a better sense of how language works. So yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. So Miss Laverne, please tell us about yourself.
Hi, everybody. I am, the first thing you need to know is I'm a recovering lawyer. So I've always written from the time, my first memories just writing on my grandmother's wall. So I was one of those people, I always had stories in my head. I was always thinking about what if, you know, if I read something and I didn't like the ending, I would change it. I was constantly doing that until finally I started just writing my own stuff. You know, they said, if you don't like something, then do it yourself. So that's what I started doing. So I've always been a writer. I was originally published with small press until 2012. And that's when I became an indie author. I got the rights back for all of my books. I've published over 40 books and I have not looked back. It's fun being an indie author. I like the control that it gives me. It allows me to expand my creativity in ways that if I was with a publisher, I would not be able to. I've always loved the written word. For me, I'm a wordsmith. People say, why do you write? I said, because I have to. A friend of mine asked me to explain where my ideas came from. And I said to her, I pointed at a cloud. We were outside and I pointed at this cloud and I pointed at it and I said, what do you see? And she said, a cloud. And I said, well, see, I see a city in that cloud. I see people in that cloud. I see a guy on a horse in that crowd. I see a world beyond that cloud. And she just looked at me and I said, you asked where do I get my ideas from? Anywhere, everywhere. To me, just opening my eyes, that's enough to get me an idea. So I write, and I write full time. I was lucky enough that I can write full time. My girls are out of the house. It's just me here and me and my dog and my cat. I had to lock the cat out because otherwise he'd be walking across the screen. But I'm happy to be here. And the last thing you need to know, I'm a chocoholic. So any chocoholics out there, come on. And I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Yes, chocolate has gotten me through many tough times, I'm telling you. All right. So thank you for telling us a little bit about who you are. Now, please tell us about your books, titles, what they're about, and why romance. Of all the genres, why romance? So we'll start with JT.
So I have a series of books right now that are out that are in, I call it Ultra Security series. So my heroes, they work for a company that essentially employs superheroes, people with special powers, to fight against other people with special powers. So if the military comes across somebody who has special abilities, they contract, because in my other life, I do government proposals. So they do government proposals to contract my heroes to come in and take care of some of the big bads that occur. So I have a couple titles out right now, A Surefire Way, I have Dama X, I have Time Trap, and Grandfather Paradox. So these are all focused, what my idea is that I have a whole world built around the Altered Security series and about people who have special abilities, but also each book has an arc that sort of carries throughout the whole series. Like it's kind of building up to the big bad, kind of like think about Avengers, like in Thanos, you know? So like you have like a story about Captain America, and you have a story about, Iron Man and their character arcs. So each book sort of focuses on one of my heroes and their character arcs, but yet there's the big Thanos-like guy who's going to be, you know, who is kind of lurking in the shadows. And each book, it gets a little stronger and a little bit more reveal of that. So I started into romance because I really liked pop culture and superheroes and horror and sci-fi, all that stuff. But the one thing that I really loved was happy endings. And so like I started writing horror. I started writing stories that were just like, you know, straight horror, straight sci-fi. But I found that I just really lacked the happy endings. And I wanted to be able to, like in each book, have something that the characters not only have a character arc because they're trying to come into their powers and who they are, but I wanted them to also find a partner in life and find somebody who is going to help them grow. Like they don't necessarily need the other person to help them grow, but they have a partner that sees them for who they are and appreciates them for who they are, which sort of gives them the confidence to go and fight and overcome their personal demons or outside demons. So, and I've always read romance. Romance is like awesome. I used to sneak into the libraries. I love libraries. Like I have such a fondness for libraries and librarians. Like you guys are like the best. And when I was a kid, I used to sneak and get like the romances, probably before I should be reading the romances. But so it just provided such a great escape for me. And even now, like I love reading all different genres, but when I read a book where it's a drama or the ending is just like, okay, this is really true life because not everybody gets a happy ending. I have to take a break and I have to read a romance because I know that I'm going to come out at the end and actually be happy. So that's how I got into doing that.
All right, thank you. Yeah, Judy Blume was my like I read Forever, which was a book I shouldn't have read at the age I read it.
Same here, yes.
So that book popped in my head when you
same exact thing too. Yep. That was my intro.
Yes, that was my intro. And my life was changed.
I feel you. Yep, exactly.
So Christina, please tell us about your books and why romance.
Sure. So I just have to add on to that library story. I had a life-changing event when I was way too young, and I went into the library and I went in the children's section and I really liked babies, and I just happened to pull the book out that says, "Where do babies come from?" That was a very life-altering library experience. So libraries have always had an important part in my life. My first book is called The Butterfly's Dance. This cover is brand new from this year. I did an update. So it's a contemporary romance. Actually, it is about a woman who has a disability, and how that affects her life, and then meets, of course, the man of her dreams. So that's the first one. This is the second one, called Wildfire. It is not connected to the first book. They are not a series. It's a different book, and actually the heroine in this book is works for like a animal protection agency, and she ends up eventually falling in love with a contractor who's a building contractor, which is very opposite in ideals, and then they somehow come together. So as far as why romance, it was totally by accident that in college a friend of mine showed me the romance novel that she was reading, and I was captured really quickly, and then so much so I went to the library once again and found all the romance novels and surpassed all the romance novels she'd ever read. So I've been a reader for a long time before I thought about even writing. Why romance? I recently read somewhere where someone said that romance genre is the genre of emotions. And I think that's why I like it so much. I certainly like the happy ever after guarantee because life doesn't have that. So I want it somewhere. But I like it because you can still go through so many emotions. You can have humor throughout the book. You can deal with some serious stuff in it, which is everyday life stuff, but still come out with a happy ending. So that's why I like and chose romance.
All right, thank you. I thought you were going to say, well, when I read that book about how babies are made, that sparked my love for romance.
No, I had no concept at that point.
All right, so Nicole, please tell us about your books and why romance.
So my books, I write romance. Romance is for your inner warrior. And my first book came out in, I believe, I want to say 2016, but it took me, it's Wild Lavender. And it took me 8 months to write 304,000 words. So, I mean, if anyone here knows, I know the romance authors on the panel know, but there are clear, hard, fast rules about romance. Number one being that you have to have a happily ever after. And number two, it should be around 80 to 120,000 words. 1,000-page manuscript. So it took several years of revising that, cut it, did all sorts of things, and then ended up getting a 2-book deal with a publisher. And I'll talk a little bit, I'm a little bit like Natalina in sort of a quasi-hybrid mode right now. They also published The Queen's Dance, another dance book, Christina. And so same colors too. And so, you know, I started out writing the Aurelian Guard series. I like to write characters that are, especially for the women, that they are very strong female characters, that they find that they can be happy, and this is going to be a little shocking, that they can be happy without a man, and then they get their happily ever after. And I always wait until I get that point where they have that epiphany that they're going to be okay, even if they don't have the happily ever after. And so there's a 3rd book that is ready to be published for this series, and I'm halfway through the 4th. But right now I have an agent who is looking for a publisher for a paranormal contemporary romance that I just wrote. And I'm also in the middle of another book that is a political thriller, which may or may not have a happily ever after. The reason I'm a little bit of a hybrid author is because I have the rights back to my first 2 books. And it's very difficult to find a publisher to pick up books that have already been published. Go figure, they want to be able to put out new books. So that's why I'm seriously looking into the self-publishing part of it. My publisher that I had was an indie publisher, so indie romances. And why did I pick romance? Well, so I'm a bit of a feminist. And where else in the world can you read a book where a woman can have it all? A job, a career, a family, supernatural powers in some cases. Romance, it has it all. And I hope that, you know, I keep hearing about these weird things where people kind of diss the genre. I haven't heard that. I'm proud of it. Luckily, I've been spared that. But if you read romance, you know that it's very empowering.
Yes, definitely. I love romance. We have an
And-
annual Racy Reads event to celebrate romance books
Mhm.
and writers. And yes, I'm
And-
sorry,
and
you're going to say?
I was just going to say, to add on to JT and Christina, the first book I read that was a romance novel when I was very young and way too young for it was Princess Daisy by Judith Krantz.
Oh.
I was 12.
Wow.
So, well, my parents had a library. They had a lot of books. They had shelves of books, and they just said, "Read what you want." So
And you did.
I did, and I turned out okay.
And you turned out perfect. All right, Carla, please tell us, please tell us about your books and why romance.
I write steamy historical romances. My current series is set in like the late Georgian period, right at the turn of the 1800s. And I like the historicals partially because I'm just a history buff. That my bachelor's degree is in history, and I think it always just is speaks to me in a fantasy kind of way to be able to write fiction about things that happened in the past. My series is The Hearts of Stanley Manor, and it centers around the Langdon family. It's 2 brothers and a sister, and each of them have their own book. The first book is called Captain of My Heart. It's a story about a sexy, reserved sea captain and the sunshine that bursts into his life in the form of a pirate's daughter. My heroes often are put in the position of having their lives sort of turned upside down. That's really my favorite trope. The second book is called Thief of My Heart. It just came out last week on Monday, so it's brand new. And it's about the older brother who is a total cinnamon roll. He's the Duke, and his his lady comes in the window in the middle of the night to steal from him. She's a jewel thief, and he gets his life turned upside down by her. It involves secret identity. She's not just jewel thief only by night. By day, she is a girl who is just trying to keep her family afloat. So, and then the third book will be out in 2021, and it's about their younger sister, Caroline. So, why romance? I always read romance ever since I was 14, and I started picking the Harlequin romance novels off of the little circle carts at the library. And I would just go like a stack this big. Yeah, my mom and dad didn't read romance, and I don't think they really understood like the adult content involved in them. So yeah, probably reading a little too young as well, but I've always read romance. I probably have bookshelves that rival the library's romance section. If I love a book, no matter if I read it on Kindle or audio, I have to own it and put it on the shelf. So it was just a natural progression to me. I've always read it, and it's just my genre. Yeah, my genre of happiness.
I like that. My genre of happiness. Yes, definitely. Natalina, please tell us about your books and why romance.
Okay, so right now I've got 13 books published. And I'm one of those crazy people that gets bored. I get bored writing the same thing. So even though I only write romance, I write across subgenres. So I've got fantasy romance, dystopian, paranormal, romantic comedy. So I normally write a romantic comedy, and right after I write something a little more serious. I use, I'm not going to tell you about all my books, but I have 2 series now. This is my first one. It's a fantasy romance set up in, a fantasy world. I'm very proud of it. It started, actually, that's the wrong one. This is the first one. It started to be just a standalone, and the story just kept going and going and going. And then I was terrified of writing a series because I was afraid I was going to run out of interesting things to say. But I got so much hate from the people that read it. You have to write more. You have to write more. So it ended up being my first series. And I have another one that's a gay romance, paranormal, who the second one is coming out in February of 2021. Most of my books, I had to find kind of a common thread throughout all the subgenres because it's really hard to market, because a person that likes romantic comedy might not like paranormal. My characters are all rebels and outcasts. And by rebels, I don't mean, the leather wearing motorcycle hero. I'm talking about somebody who doesn't quite fit inside, the little square, inside the box. It's somebody that always is slightly different and he doesn't care and it sticks to it no matter what other people think of them. But like I said, I love fantasy and paranormal, but it's normally kind of heavy, always happy ending. Of course, it's romance, but sometimes it's hard. It's emotionally taxing to write it. So normally after I write something like that, I have to write a romantic comedy. Even though my romantic comedies also have mystery, and I'm one of those that cannot differentiate things, so I just throw everything in and hope that it works. Why romance? So my namesake, my aunt, who was my family matriarch, she was like the boss of the family. Everything kind of revolved around her. She was one of those, back then, I'm pretty sure I'm the oldest one in this panel right now. In the age of the dinosaurs, when women were not employed outside the house, she was a working woman. She played sports. She was a woman ahead of her time. And everybody thought that she was a very cold person because she was not the hugging, sweet talking person. But the interesting thing about her was that she always had a romance book with her. She read it every day. She had a huge collection. Back then, it was a Spanish collection called Corintelados, which are basically the Spanish version of a Harlequin romance. And she has a whole library. She had a whole library of those books. And then she also loved opera and ballet, and she got me into all of that. And think about it, most of the plot for all those things are romance, right? There's always normally like a love story, not always with a happy ending, but still a love story. So I've been always interested in romance. And then my dad, I told you that he worked for an airline. He would go was a mechanic. So he would go into the planes and people would buy the Harlequin romance, the mass market paperbacks, and they would buy it just for that trip and they would leave it in the plane. They would just trash it. So he would bring me all these books. Again, I was a young teenager. He did not read English. These books weren't in English, and he didn't realize what content really he was bringing home. So yeah, I think we all kind of have the same type of introduction to romance, but I was fascinated by it. So as soon as I decided to start writing to try to be published, romance was the first thing in my mind. I just had to write romance.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I think if our parents knew what we were reading, it would not be good. All right, Laverne, please tell us about your books and why romance. Unmute yourself.
Okay. I am a romantic at heart, so of course I have to read and write romance. And I think the first books I really started reading were my aunt's Harlequins. I used to sneak them. And so I always loved the idea of a happy ending. But then I also discovered fantasy. I discovered the Dragons of Pern series, Anne McCarthy, and I fell in love with fantasy, Tolkien, all of it, what they used to call high fantasy. I wanted to merge the two, but I still like contemporary stuff. So I actually write under two names, two different voices. Under Laverne, I write fantasy, paranormal, a little bit of romantic suspense, but by and far, fantasy and paranormal. And recently, and it's
Laverne,
an
you're
urban
breaking
fantasy, and it
up on us a little bit, Laverne. Oh my. Oh my. All right. So I'm not sure. I guess we're having some connection issues with Laverne. So hopefully she will be able to connect and we can continue hearing her share about her books. All right. So while we're waiting for her to reconnect, let's talk a little bit about your books and your ideas. Where do you get your ideas for your books? So we'll start with JT.
Kind of going like with what Laverne said earlier about like she looks up and she saw the clouds and she saw a world up there. I want to say like everywhere. You know, that's kind of like where I get my ideas. They can come from anywhere and everywhere. I've one of my books, the Dama X book. I am one of my secret obsessions is with. Oh, hey, do you want to go Laverne now?
Yes. Yeah.
I'll finish that thought.
All right. We lost you. You're back. Yay.
I got to tell you, I've been doing Zoom meetings for months. That has never happened. Suddenly I was gone. It's like, okay, what happened? What happened?
Yeah, you froze.
All right, I'm sorry. Technical difficulties. I think I was talking about Wild Child. It's an urban fantasy, and I love this story because it focuses on a very strong, independent female. Actually, most of my stories, my heroines are strong, independent females, but I particularly like this one because she's the focus of the story, and she just happens to find her soulmate, if you will. But the focus is on her, and the romance is actually second. Unlike some of my other books, this one, I don't know if you guys heard when I said one of the things that I love about romance is blending romance and fantasy, because I first discovered romance, then I discovered things like Tolkien, and I wanted to combine the two. And I read this, the Dragons of Pern series by Anne McCarthy, and I kept waiting for the people to turn into a dragon. I don't want a dragon as my friend. I want to be the dragon. So I started the story of the Brethren, which is about a race of dragon shifters. Now I write under two names. Laverne, it's mostly fantasy, paranormal, some sci-fi. I also write under Ursula Sinclair, very different voice. Ursula's work is more new adults, so the protagonists are between the ages of 18 to 25, and there's a lot more angst. Now, usually new adult books are supposed to be about college students, high school students, grad school students, but not everyone gets a chance to go to college. There's some people that excel at other things and they do very well. Hence, my Ballerina and the Fighter series. This story is about a young girl who becomes a professional ballerina, and the hero, the guy, is an MMA fighter, and both are at the top of their fields, and neither one of them went to college, and they did very, very well. So lots of angst, but there's also a little bit of a twist to that story. I have a lot of books, so I'm not going to go through everything, but you kind of get a taste a little bit of the kind of books that I like. So depending on if you like fantasy, paranormal, might want to be more interested in Laverne. If you like Ursula, if you like new adult, more younger people, you might be more interested in Ursula. And I don't make the name secret. I just make it clear that they're very two different voices, because I've had people who didn't know Ursula, who didn't know one was the other, and they discovered me, and they would say, "Oh, I didn't know that was you." I'm like, "Yeah, that's good. That means that it's a different voice, so it's working." And then I have readers who love my fantasy stuff, but they won't touch new adult, because some people just don't want to read about a 19 or 20-year-old, which is fine. But anyway, that's me.
So when you write across genres, Nicole used this term, you're called a hybrid writer. Is that?
No. A hybrid author is someone who has been published either through small press or traditional press, a traditional publisher, and also self-published. That's a hybrid author. What I do is I just write across genres, but I use two names to do it in. But that's not a hybrid author.
Okay. All right. Thank
in
you.
the language of the industry, if you say hybrid, they're going to think that person self-publishes, and they also under contract with, they publish for a publishing house.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for that. All right. So where do you get your ideas? And we'll go back to JT.
So everywhere. I think that's where I left off. But, this is one of the things I want to encourage people, because, everybody has different personalities. So you're going to get ideas from different places. But what works for me, I'm like a huge input personality. And I find like if I can't really write in a void. So a lot of times I look for things to inspire me. And I carry like a little book around me in my purse. And even sometimes I just use my iPhone. Like sometimes I'll just see a person who looks interesting at the mall. Maybe the way they're talking, or maybe I see a singer, or maybe I see a play. I see an opera, and I just love, like all of a sudden, like, what if this person does this? What if this happens to them? What is their backstory? Like that kind of stuff. Like I'm constantly wondering what if, I'm constantly asking what if. One of the other things too is I love to read. I also am a huge pop culture. Like I love all types of pop culture. Like I actually, one of the scenes in my book, A Surefire Way, was actually inspired by a Flintstones episode. Like there was like one of my favorite Flintstones episodes as a child. And so it kind of like inspired me. There's something else that happens in A Surefire Way that has to do with going back in time and playing the Aztec ball game, which I was on a cruise, and we went and we saw a court, ball court. This was actually at Tulum, which are Mayan ruins, but I had never known about this ball game that they played in ancient Mexico, which I found fascinating. And I kept that in my mind, because that was over 20 years ago. And about 10 years later, it made it into one of my books. So you never know what's going to inspire you. There was, one time I was writing a scene for my story, and I could not figure out how to get my heroes out of the situation. And I was just totally stuck. So I put it down. I went and watched a Mission Impossible, and they got out of the scene. There was a scene that was very similar to what I was writing. I was like, oh, that would work, and it isn't like I wasn't stealing the scene or anything like that. It was just the fact that it was the way that the characters work together to get out of it would inspired me for like, oh, that could set it up for later on. One of the other things I absolutely love, I love James Bond. So in my Dama X series, I have a lot of actually little Easter eggs to James Bond movies because I grew up watching them, but I didn't really want to be the girls that helped him. I wanted to be James Bond, but like have a bunch of men, you know, instead of like all the women bonding over me, like I wanted to have all the dudes like around me. So I was inspired by all the gadgets and all the fun stuff in James Bond and the larger than life villains in James Bond. So I wanted to put that in some of my story of Dama X. So a lot of times you can take things that you enjoy, that books you enjoy. Like I have a lot of books that are some of my favorite books, and I actually put little Post-it notes just because I love the way an author did a piece of dialogue or described a scene. And it's not, you know, it is just something to inspire me. Like, how can I do it better? How can I work this scene better? How can I dig deeper like this author did? Again, it's for inspiration. It's not, you know, definitely, you know, not stealing or anything like that. The idea is to just look at how other people do it, or just look for inspiration about things that you love to help infuse your own writing and understanding of how you can do things. For me, it's very important that I study other people's work too, just like, you know, when you're in college and you're studying different types of literature to understand how they did it. And even musicians will talk about being inspired, you know, by the Beatles, by James Brown, by, you know, all different types of artists from all different genres that come to infuse, you know, current stories, current hip hop and current, you know, rock and roll artists. It's interesting how they find inspiration from cross genres, even from like classical music. So I think sometimes just making sure that you read, that you look at life, just be curious. I think that's the best thing. I think that's most authors I know. They're very curious people. They want to understand what makes people tick. They want to understand the why behind things. Why, you know, like myths and legends are one of my absolute favorite things. Like, where did this come from? Why do we have these myths? Where did these Roman gods come from? Where did the Greek gods come from? That to me is just absolutely cool, and, you know, and that inspires my work. So.
Thank you. All right, Christina, where do you get your ideas?
The short answer is I have no idea. The longer answer is I think life is a good inspiration. I also kind of want to jump on one thing that JT said is the what if scenarios. I didn't realize until years later after I wrote my books that I kind of had a personal dilemma or something that I wanted to work out, and I ended up working it out in the books. It was not intentional, and I didn't pick it up until years later. But somehow I had something, you know, internally to say. The first book was about the woman with a disability, and so that's sort of obvious for me, but I also had a what if scenario from years ago when I was like in junior high of, okay, what if you could not have your disability? What if you had your choice? So that ended up in the book. But again, I didn't, like, it was not focused at all when I actually wrote the book, and did not realize until years later that those are some of the elements. The second book has the heroine works for environmental animal rescue agency, and now it makes sense. But at the time, I worked for an environmental group, and I just thought, wow, what if, you know, you're in work for this agency, but you somehow fall for someone who's kind of the opposite of that? How would that work out? So it's a lot about the what ifs. It's a lot about internal stuff for me, I think. But I also think, like others will say here, you know, ideas can just be found anywhere if you're really open to them.
All right, thank you. Nicole, where do you get your ideas?
Well, so I'm blessed or cursed, depending on how you want to look at it, with a really super active mind right before trying to go to sleep. So this is more of the why I get my ideas. I run chapters through my heads like scenes in a movie. And I would do this for years. I had this big story in my head, which I think I mentioned it was 1,000 pages, but each week I would get another chapter and I would perfect it and run it over and over and edit it in my brain. And one day I just decided to write it down. But I'm like Christina. I mean, life, I get my ideas from just life. I was lucky enough to work at a really high profile luxury hotel in San Francisco. And there are all kinds of stories I could tell you, but I want to put them in a book. And I have one that is just a concept in my head about a concierge and Montana and all kinds of different things. But yeah, pretty much life is where I get it.
Great, thank you. And Carla, where do you get your ideas?
I don't know. I think for me, the ideas for my stories usually always start with a character that just, sort of plays over and over in my head. It's like somebody's knocking from the inside, like, hey, my story is interesting. Talk to me. I have a lot of characters rolling around up there. I feel like it's always like that opening scene, and it just sort of, I'm driving in the car, I'm doing groceries and mundane things, and my brain is just sort of flipping through this this scenario until I have to write it down and get started with it. I have a lot of I've written maybe 3 or 4 books, but I probably have about 6 or 7 characters that are like up to bat, like in the lineup. I don't really know exactly what's going to happen to them yet, but they're there. And so I don't know. I guess you just get your inspiration as like, from people in line, from your surroundings. Yeah, overactive imagination before bed for sure comes. I have a lot of ideas at that time as well. And yes, I can't tell you. I guess I can't explain it better than that. It's a.
All right, thank you. And Natalina, where do you get your ideas?
Well, like everybody else, a little bit from everywhere. Life, yeah, a lot of my life experiences might always normally end up in my books. But I'm a very visual person, so I've actually have quite a few of my books that started, or the idea started with a picture that I saw somewhere, like my Jewel Chronicles. A friend of mine had posted a picture of a dragon eye. It was probably a lizard, but to me it was a dragon. A lizard eye through a hole on a tree. And that just started going around in my head, and I had to write something down, and ended up being a series. There is a dragon in the story, but he's not the main character though. There's a bunch of my stories that started with a picture, like the one that I'm writing right now, my current project. It's going to be self-published. And I was not planning the story at all. And I was looking through, I love art, and I love cover art. So once in a while I go visit all these places just to look and salivate over these beautiful covers. And this girl had this cover that I fell in love with. And even though I had 0 stories to go with it, I bought it. And I'm looking at it, I'm going, why did I buy this? I don't have a book for this cover. But the story just started churning. So inspired by the cover, I am now almost 20,000 words into this book. So yeah, but I go to Panera is my office away from home. So coffee shops are awesome. to watch people and get ideas. I once wrote a story about this guy that just walked in Panera, and really handsome, hot guy, super tall, beautiful man, but the way he was dressed, it was like, what the heck were you thinking to get dressed like that, right? So I had to write a whole story and explore why he was dressed like that. So yeah, so life, if I'm going through, writing for me is therapy also. So if I'm down, or I'm dealing with stress or problems at work or whatever, writing takes me away from that. So it's my escape. It's my little room where I can just lock myself in and just let the rest of life just happen without me in it, basically. So yeah.
All right, thank you. And Laverne, where do you get your ideas? Oh no, is she frozen again? I think she's frozen again. All right. All right. So I want to, where our
I get
time
my
is,
ideas.
oh, hold on, Laverne. Wait
Great.
a minute. You were frozen.
Great.
All right, there you are. All right,
Am I
you're
back?
frozen. Yes, you're back.
Like everyone else, I get my ideas from everywhere and anywhere. I love fantasy, so I love building worlds from scratch, so I can form it and make it work the way I want it to work. But my ideas come from any and everywhere. I open my eyes and I get an idea. I hear a song and immediately I get an idea. I see somebody, I get an idea. It just everywhere and anywhere, any topic, anything you can think of, I can spin it into a story. And I think any storyteller is like that. We're storytellers. That's what we do. And I think that's more apt than saying author. I call myself, I say I'm an author. Really, when I talk about it, I say I'm a storyteller. I tell stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you are. You all are storytellers. I didn't think of it like that.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
So it's 7:30. I can't believe we've been here for 1 hour. I want to ask you one more question, and then I think we'll open it up for Q&A. But I want to ask, what are the challenges of being an indie writer? So we'll start with JT.
Oh boy.
Oh.
I'm going to start with the challenges, but can I also end on the positive? Because I want to encourage people out there who are listening, who are going to be indie authors, that there are a lot of challenges, but the positive outcomes outweigh it. For me, I know a couple my top, I'm going to say my top 3 challenges. Number 1 is setting deadlines for myself. I am accountable to me. I am not accountable to a publisher and their deadlines. So I need to make sure that I put deadlines on myself that I will meet, and that I make sure that I do meet them. I hold myself accountable. When I hire an editor to look at my work, I do have a deadline for them. But when I'm writing my first draft, a lot of times I may not set a deadline for myself, and it's very important, I believe, to have that deadline so that you can therefore have your goals, so that you're not just working on your first draft for years. Instead, you have a plan going forward. And that's, I think, kind of going in the second one is, a lot of times when you are with a publisher, it doesn't always necessarily mean they're going to give you a plan right away, unless they are going to be putting a bunch of money into you. But having an idea, because once you have a timeline set for yourself, for your deadlines, for your first draft, your second draft, when it goes to an editor, when it gets back, when you want to have it formatted, then you make plans for the marketing. And it's very, very important those first days of launching your first book, especially if it's in a series and you have a couple that are coming after, it's very important to plan out your marketing as well and to have that set up in advance. And that's a huge challenge for me because I run a graphic design and presentation business with my husband. My time is very, very fractured. So I have limited time for writing and then trying to carve out time for marketing, as well as working on my day job. So that's a huge challenge. And that is for me. I have some friends that are highly organized that are amazing. I'm not a very organized person. So that's a huge challenge for me for the deadlines. The positive thing is, and I think a few other people have mentioned this on the panel, is that I got to write stories that I love. When I wrote my first book, A Surefire Way, I was trying to get published with that. And I definitely was writing more to certain publishers to try to get published. And I enjoyed that book. But I felt like with my next few books, I got to really let loose once I decided to go indie. And I got to use my vision. I worked with editors, I worked with content editors too, just to help me hone my craft and to make sure everything was smooth. But that to me was the amazing thing about being an indie author, is that I got to write the books of my dreams. So.
All right, thank you. And I like that add-on to the question about what are the positives. So I've just added that. We'll be asking our other writers. So thank you for that. So Christina, what is a challenge of being an indie author? And then what's something positive about being an indie author?
Well, to answer both questions is you get to write the story that you love. So that's a positive, and that can be not necessarily a negative, but you need to kind of learn the craft as well as getting your story published. What I had to do was I tried for about 5 years to get my first book published. Now, mind you, those first couple of years, I really had to learn the craft. I thought I knew it because I read it, but it's different to write it. So I had to, really work on that. But then the last few years, I tried so hard to publish it. And I just had to make a mental or emotional decision that I really needed to have my story told. And if that's not the traditional way, I'm going to do it this other way. Now, I didn't make money. I didn't make the front of USA Today magazine or newspaper back when we had newspapers. So I didn't get any, that didn't happen, but I had to make that decision with myself that was okay, that I really needed the story to be told. Now it's been a few years since I've had my books published. Marketing is very different now. You have more Facebook, more Twitter, more all that stuff. And so I think indie authors have better resources to work on that than maybe I did at the time. So it's more reachable, I think, now for indie authors. But back when I was trying to do it, I think for me, I had to make that decision.
Right, thank you. And Nicole, what are the challenges of being an indie author and what are the positives?
So for me, my definition of an indie author is a little bit more expansive, as in I was with an independent press. But more on that is that, this idea, the challenge of making the decision to self-publish something is really, it's almost heart-wrenching because I know that I can do it, but there's a balance of trying to find, sorry, my son just came in for a second. There's a balance of trying to find time for family and a full-time job and juggling that with writing time and being creative. And on top of that, the writing is the fun part, and it's maybe 30-40% of the time. The rest is the hard work. It's the marketing, it's the getting out there and getting your book to people. And but the payoff is you get to get your story out there. And if it can help, if it can brighten someone, I mean, this is going to sound really kind of trite, but if it can brighten someone's day, if someone enjoys what I've written, it means the world to me. So I always, you know, I have a book club at work. Unfortunately, it's all books about entrepreneurs and innovators. So it's very boring stuff, like Steve Jobs, great innovator, but very boring book. But I encourage everyone, all of the people who are part of that book club, to write reviews. So if you enjoy a book, if anyone's listening, if you read something and you enjoy it, whether it's a mainstream author or an indie author, go onto Goodreads, go onto Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and review that author, because it's the best way for that author's works to get to other people. And I'm not going to go into all of the Amazon algorithms, but there's a magic number called 50 ratings or reviews, that once you get that, then you get starting. If you know how when you buy something from Amazon and you get the thing at the bottom that says, if you like this, you'll maybe like all this stuff, or other people who bought this also bought that. That's how authors get into that Amazon algorithm. So please, that's my one pitch. Just make sure to review books that you like.
All right, thank you, Nicole. And Carla, what are the challenges of being an indie author? What are the positives?
I guess the challenges, I'm with Nicole. I published my first 2 books here with a small indie press, and it's just marketing myself. So there's no money thrown at you. There's I got some help with the editorial and the covers, and then you have to sort of learn how to market yourself, and to be brave and to talk about yourself and your book. It's sometimes hard to sort of get over you should be modest, and you should the self-promotion thing has been a learning curve for me, for sure. And just everybody has advice about how to be how to be an author, how to market it as, your books, who to contact. Everybody has different advice and things that worked for them, and you sort of have to filter through all of that and pick out, what's going to work for you and what's going to work for your books. So that's been a struggle. And this pandemic year, when I've just been sitting at home on social media, it's hard not to sort of think, am I doing what everyone else is doing? Am I doing the successful thing that this successful author is doing? I think that's been my biggest challenge, for sure. And that's just the learning curve, of being a new author. So things that are good, even though I'm not fully indie author, like I published my own book, the small press, they're very like hands off. So I was able to, they didn't mess with my story. The editor loved it, and they sort of have they do the proofreading and they do the editing, the nitty gritty, but they didn't mess around with my story. And I think with all indie, like what the others were saying, it's nice to be able to tell your story the way you want it told, and not to have to fit into a box. When I was trying to sell my first story, Captain, Harlequin was interested in it, but they wanted me to change it because I didn't have the kissing and the I love you at the end of the book. I had it sort of in the middle, and then things got messed up, and then they had to recover from it. And they're like, no, they can't have I love you 75% through the book. You have to move that to the end. And they had a lot of stipulations to fit into what they like for their books. So being the best part about, being indie or with small press that is independent press, is being able to have control over what you like your book to look like.
Thank you. And Natalina, the challenges and the positives.
The challenges, it's to be discovered. As an indie author, like I said, I'm a hybrid. So I've got my first book was published by a small publisher that basically they took care of the editing and the cover, and I think they gave me some teasers. But then ever since then, they have done nothing. It's all me. I am the one who has to do all the marketing. My other publisher is a lot better about it. And as they get a little more, they started really small, they're getting a little bigger. They actually help me a little bit, but it's still the bulk of all the marketing falls on me. But my biggest challenge is to be discovered. I mean, there's so many, especially in romance, there's so many romance writers that you get lost in the ocean. It's the struggle, like Carla was saying, is to try to figure out what is going to work. I've tried, I take tons of workshops, and then somebody else comes with another idea. Oh, this really worked. I sold a ton of books. And then you try it and nothing happens. It's like, fizzes out. And then it gets very frustrated, especially for me, because like I said, I work full time as a teacher, and I really have very, very little time to write. And I want to spend that time that I've got actual writing. I don't want to have to spend all this time marketing. But I get frustrated because I know I need to be marketing and I don't have the time for it. So it's like, it's a balance. That's the toughest part. The positive part, Carla was saying too, I've been very lucky with this publisher that I have. They're very hands off too. They're very, they really work with the authors. They respect the publisher herself as a writer, so she knows how our head works. So they're very respectful of your concept. What is your concept for the story? So unless they see something absolutely that they know that it's not going to fly, they will go along with you. But with the 2 books and now a third one that I've got coming out in May that I'm going to also going to self-publish. I actually, because of my lack of time, this is very shameful and embarrassing, but my publisher has a self-publishing branch, which basically she offers a package where she does all the editing, she comes up with the covers, beta readers, formatting, everything. All you do really is write the story, do the edits, and then you actually are the one who published the book, and then they don't have anything else to do with it. So because of my lack of time, I actually prefer to do that. I think it's a little more expensive than if I did it all by myself, but in the long run, it's worth for me because of my time issues. But it's nice to have a lot of control over these things.
All right, thank you. And Laverne, what are the challenges? What are the positives to being an indie writer?
Like everyone else said,
Laverne, you're breaking up. I think it's me. I think I'm jinxing her. Because I see her moving until I ask her to talk.
And
Laverne? All right, there you are. Hello, there you are.
Well, I was saying all I want to do is write, but I have to spend a lot of time marketing, and that's the toughest. That's really the toughest part for me is all I'm going to do. But even with small now,
Laverne, I think your computer's tired. I think it's all those Zoom meetings.
It might, it could be. Could be. Suddenly everybody's everybody
Oliver,
going now.
you're still kind of frozen.
Let's see.
All right. Oh, poor Laverne. I'm sorry she's having difficulty. All right. So I think what we'll do, I want to ask how people can buy your books, but we'll save that to the very, very end. I do want to open it up and see if we have any questions from our audience. We did have one question in chat that asks, how do you find readers as indie authors? So I'm just going to throw that out and we won't go in order. If you want to answer it, please unmute yourself and share. How do you find readers?
I can share a few things. Definitely through social media is one thing. You can, unfortunately, Facebook has changed a lot of its algorithms. Back in the day, you used to be able to just do like an author page and you could reach a lot of people. Now they want you to pay for ads. So they make it a little harder to do it more organically. But definitely having a social media presence has helped me. Amazon is the largest way to get readers. It's one of the largest platforms that sells books. And so definitely having your book there, having it using their advertising and understanding how their keyword situation works, ensuring that you have the right keywords on your books so that readers, when they do the search functions, they will find you. And also one of the other ways too is, for me, speaking at conferences. I've done a lot of presenting at conferences and being on panels. And every time I do that, I end up getting new readers and also meeting authors who might write in my genre or write similar to me. And we partner up. One of the best ways I ever actually sold a lot of books was through an anthology that I was part of with about 4 or 5 other indie authors. And we all marketed to our readers and it opened it up a lot. And it didn't cost me that much money at all. So that was another good way to reach readers.
Yeah, and kind of like piggybacking on what she said, networking with other authors, even in social. I'm an introvert. I'm not very good at talking to people face to face. But on Facebook, I have no trouble reaching out to other authors, and I have throughout the years now, I've got a nice group of authors that we all kind of know each other online and we support each other. So if I have a new release or I've got a book on sale or something like that, I will ask, and they're very generous and they will post it on their sites. So I'm reaching people that are not necessarily my current readers and people that follow me. And of course, I return the favor. So anytime that they have a new release or they have anything that they want to bring to more readers, I'm willing to do it. Same thing with newsletters. If you have a newsletter, which everybody tells you, you have to have a newsletter. I'm going to be upfront. I hate newsletters, but I have one. But I absolutely hate, it's like torture every month to have to write that newsletter, but I do it. And yeah, so I also do the same thing. So I reach out to other authors and I say, hey, do you have a book on sale? Do you want me to put it on my newsletter? And so they send me the stuff, I put in my newsletter, and then they offer, okay, so when you have something that you want me to put it in my newsletter. So you're kind of networking. So that, I mean, we don't have, and of course, if you have a lot of money, you can post gigantic ads on, on all kinds of media. But for most authors, especially indie authors, that's a good way that it's not expensive at all, doesn't cost anything. And it's a good way of reaching more people that normally you wouldn't be able to reach.
And, there's little things that you can do that are just kind of almost silly that people don't really think about. but for years I walk around with a rubber band stack of bookmarks in my purse, so that when I go to the grocery store, I find books in the same sort of genre or subgenre, and I stick my bookmarks in those paperback books because they read it and they're like, oh, look at this great bookmark in this book. I'll use it. Hey, who's this author? Now, I don't know how many sales I've gotten doing that. Probably very few. And I'm sorry, my son opened my door, and so now my dog's in the background. I apologize. This is hashtag Tully the dog. He's got his own hashtag. But yeah, just little things, anything and everything you can do is what you have to do. And that's why marketing is such a big time portion of the whole trying to be an author. And don't be shy about it. I hate talking about my own books, but you got to get over it and you can't be shy about it.
All right, so Laverne, you're back, yay. So we'll give you a chance to continue your discussion about the positives and challenges of being an indie writer.
Just the marketing is the main challenge, and the positive is being able to write what I want to write and to set my own schedules. I'm one of those that I love covers. I've got a brilliant cover artist, and so I love being able to have a say in my own covers. Sometimes I design them myself, and I do a lot of custom covers. So I arrange custom shoots with the models that I want to use or a particular photographer that I want to use. And it's fun. It's a lot of fun. At the end of the day, I might scream and rant and rave about the marketing, but at the end of the day, I hit the end, upload that book to Amazon. I'm like, yay! So it's a good feeling. It's a good feeling.
All right, thank you. All right, so I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. But before we end our event, how can people buy your books, JT?
Well, I'm going to be running a promo this week on Amazon with my first 2 books in the series. So they're going to be on sale in honor of Indie Author Week. So yay. But all my books are on Amazon. I also have so it would be the ebook and the paperback. And on Apple Books is an ebook for Time Trap, my last book, and I have the paperbacks are in Barnes and Noble, and pretty much from most retailers. But Amazon has always been my main thing, and that's where I'm going to be running a sale for starting tomorrow. So yay!
All right, yay! All right, Christina.
You can find both my books on Amazon, and the second book is also available in ebook format from Amazon as well.
All right, thank you. Nicole.
Okay, so I'm going to say something that's just going to be shocking to everyone here because you'll never hear an author say this. My books are available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and you can get them on Indie Books, and you can get them everywhere you can. But this is what I'm going to say. Please don't buy my books. I know that's crazy, but sometimes you have a great editor at a publishing house, and then sometimes the publishing house doesn't have a happily ever after, and you have to break up with them. I've broken up with my publisher. So, and one of the many reasons is that they're just not that great. They're just not that great. We'll just leave it at that. So watch for me being able to push out. I think the best way to do it would be to follow me on Twitter. And when I revise my first 2 books and put them back out, if you go to M. Kelleher Author on Twitter, I'll be shouting it to the world at that point.
And Carla, how can people buy your books?
You can buy my books anywhere. I think that you can, whatever your preferred retailer is, that's Amazon or Barnes & Noble, Apple Books, Kobo. Their captain is in all formats. It's in audio as well, and Thief is paperback and ebook. You can also go to my website at www.carlacradaville.com, and all the buy links are there for you.
All right, thank you. Natalina.
So my books are also available on obviously Amazon and most Barnes and Noble, Apple, Kobo, Nook. I do have a few that are Kindle Unlimited, and those, just the electronic version is only on Amazon, but most of my books go wide, so you can buy the paperbacks or the ebooks pretty much on any of the digital stores out there. You can reach me. So if you want to go to my website, it's easy to remember. It's just Natalina Hayes in one word, no capitals.com. And you can follow me anywhere. I've got an author's page on Facebook. I have a readers group on Facebook. I am on BookBub. I am on Twitter, which I don't use very much. I am on Instagram. And if you look for Natalina Hayes, there's not that many Natalina Hayes out there. So you probably can find me really easy. Yeah, because when I type my name, I'm the first one that always shows up. There's no others. So it's the advantage of having a weird name. And just in case you want to try it without paying anything, Desert Jewel, which is the first one in my series, it's actually perma-free now on Amazon. So you can get the ebook, not the paperback, but the ebook, you can get it for free. If it's something that it's a fantasy romance, if you want to check it out and see if you like it before buying any of the other books.
All right, thank you. And Laverne. Oh no. Unmute yourself, Laverne.
All of my books are on Amazon. And I also have some books on Kindle Unlimited. So because of that, all of my books are on Amazon. Most of them are on iTunes and Barnes and Noble, and I have some of them on Kobo. But if you go on Amazon, you can find all of my books under both names. Ursula Sinclair, if you like the 18 to 25 with angst, this first book, the ebook, is free, but most of my books are also in print. I do have a couple of short stories, maybe about 3 that aren't in print, just in ebooks, but everything else is in print. I do have a starter paranormal or fantasy. It's called Zeus, Lost God, only 99 cents. But you can find me on Amazon.
All right.
Or on my website, lavernethompson.com.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. Thank you, writers, dear people, for being a part of our panel and sharing your experiences. Like I said, you are a guinea pig. This was virtual, trying to work around the pandemic, and I think it was very successful. And that's because of you being such wonderful speakers, as you told us about your experiences as writers. So this is our second event in celebrating Indie Author Week. I hope to see everyone tomorrow at 12:30 for Let's Talk About Historical Fiction. You will meet a panel of local historical fiction writers as they talk about their books and journey as writers. So I'm going to put in the chat the link to more information about the upcoming Indie Author event. So I invite you to check those out and register. And I hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you again, dear writers, for being a part of our romance panel tonight. Have a great evening.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Thank you.